Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I've made it out on a very chilly morning over to Danbury Lakes to try and capture some of the autumn colours here that are reflected on the lake. So fingers crossed it's going to be a really interesting sunrise. It's a bit of a high cloud there, so I'm not too sure that I'm going to get the sunrise that I really wanted. But the one benefit of being today is it's the day of the Saturday just before the clocks go back, so sunrise is not until 20 to 8 in the morning. So being obviously a landscape photographer, the later sunrise is, the better for me, because then obviously I can stay that extra hour or two in bed rather than obviously getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning. So yeah, hopefully it's nice to be back out here, really peaceful, just sharing the morning with the ducks on the lake, and hopefully will work out really good photography wise. Autumn for me is a great time of year for photography, just capturing those colours and textures within the changing seasons, and just in general I really enjoy it, sort of the more cosier evenings, wrapping up in sort of some winter jumpers and stuff like that. I really do enjoy. But one thing I have done in years gone by with regarding photography and capturing it with the autumn colours is try to push it too much. I think I've always done several vlogs about waiting for autumn, chasing autumn. This year I've tried to be a little bit more restrained and waited several weeks until I sort of felt that autumn had really arrived within my sort of corner of the country. Obviously, as everyone knows, autumn arrives at their particular area at different spots between the sort of end of September to beginning of November. So we're at the sort of back end of October now, and luckily enough I think I've popped here right at the nice time. There's a couple of trees that have already turned that sort of lovely orange and yellowy colours, but a couple of other trees that are still sort of in full green leaf. And what I really like about that is you're going to get that contrast between obviously the yellows, oranges, and then the greens as well. Coming to this location with this large lake of the 3 that are here is going to work out really quite nice. Now for me, and where I've got my camera pointing, the sun is going to rise sort of over to the right hand side of the composition, and hopefully, fingers crossed, cast some lovely light across the top of the trees, and as obviously been working the scene already, work out really quite nicely. So I've had the camera in vertical orientation and taken about a 6 or 8 panoramic image across this area, because what I wanted to do is make sure that I've obviously got the 77D in the vertical orientation, so obviously give me that perspective of both a little bit of the foreground brush in the foreground, then obviously the lake itself, trees, and then obviously some of the sky as well, stitching it all together in a panoramic, because it is quite a wide vista here, and that will hopefully work out really quite nicely. Settings for the camera for that one is, I've been sort of playing around with it to be honest, but the settings that I've stuck with is f8 ISO 100 and about 15 to 25 seconds exposure. I've played around and done that as one panoramic. Then I've come back and done a base image of a 4-second panoramic, but bracketed 1 stop either side. So hopefully that will give me a little bit more dynamic range, because yeah, it is quite dark in the mid-ground, particularly with the trees, but obviously highlighted with the sky behind. So yeah, so we're getting a little bit more pinky colour on the high cloud. Try and capture a couple of more. trying to act really quickly as the sky is really lighting up now. Possibly can't see it on there. Let's see if I can just change that in a second, but I've got to focus on this photography. Yeah, you can hopefully see that now. Again, just keeping the settings at f8 ISO 100, 4 seconds as my base image, however exposing one stop either side and allowing the camera to do that, because this sky is really interesting now. Luckily enough, I had the high cloud on the app when I was planning my shoot this morning, but I was worried that it was actually going to be snuffed out and I wasn't actually going to get any sunrise. But like on a previous vlog, it's proven worthwhile coming out to shoot in these conditions, because what I'm also liking, and look, you can just about see it on your shot, is obviously the reflections in the water as well, which is really interesting. And the only thing that I would really like, and that's always the way, isn't it, with photographers, oh, I wish I had this and I wish I had that, a little bit of mist, oh, that would have been really good for this shot. Oh, hopefully I haven't wobbled that one and ruined that one. One more for the panoramic. So also the lay of the land where I'm at the moment is on a little bit of a high ground around this area. Now I'm not obviously saying it's anything high at all. However, what I'm hoping is as the sun will rise in the direction that you can see, will cast light over to the left hand side of the composition and start lighting up the tops of the trees and then working its way down. But the clouds there, the high clouds there, so it may be able to get this, maybe. So I've got that image, really enjoying it as well, and hopefully the reflections and the colour, particularly as you can see there, will obviously come back in and work out to be really interesting, because this is obviously what I really wanted. That sort of sky in the morning, catching the light, will hopefully work out really well. Great morning to be here, and yeah, really enjoyable. So what I'm enjoying about this composition of taking this panoramic across is some of these reeds in the foreground, and that's what I'm taking my sort of focus on. So I'm obviously focusing on that, swapping it over to manual then focus, and then obviously then taking the 6 or 8 panoramic image, composition that I've got here, because each time you obviously allowing the camera to refocus, you may well get that distortion when you're obviously coming back to obviously blend them all together in post-processing. So it's always worthwhile to take obviously the focus point right in the center of the composition that you're looking at. Now ideally, yes, I probably would have gone for my traditional f11, but obviously I wanted to open the aperture up a little bit more because obviously the lighting conditions, and where I've got that sort of heavy bank of trees right in the middle of the composition, that's very dark compared to the sky, and I would have obviously had to played around a lot more with the shutter speed, which is obviously what I didn't want to capture. But the other thing I did want to make sure I did with the exposures and the shutter speed particularly is increase it to at least sort of 3-4 seconds, which is what I've been able to do, because there's a lot of ducks, as you've possibly heard on the audio already, around here, which is great, and it's fantastic to see the wildlife in such abundance around here, but I don't necessarily want that as being frozen within the actual final composition and image, because if I've got that longer exposure, some of the ripples that they're creating in the water will obviously be smoothed out, and obviously some of the actual ducks themselves will be obviously smoothed out and lost within the slight long exposure. But yeah, hopefully working out really well now. So sunrise is in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then maybe another 5 minutes or so above there, and hopefully get some light on those trees. But one of the other things I made sure that I did this morning, just before I came out, is made 2 flasks of coffee, so I will have one of them now, I think. So I've moved over now to using my long lens, 70 to 300 Sigma lens. The cloud has increased a bit more, and I'm not sure that I'm actually going to get any sunlight on the top of the trees, which is what I was hoping for. But that doesn't mean that the shoot should stop there. And having the 70 to 300 lens in the bag and you're lugging it around with you, you might as well start to use it. And what some of the images that I've been able to start to look at doing is the ones that I really wanted to capture, where I was talking earlier about the contrast between the trees that have already turned the lovely autumnal colours and some of the trees that are still sort of green, and getting that contrast. Now there's a couple of compositions that I've already worked on, but one here that I'm really enjoying. So using the reach of the lens right in there, 135mm on the lens there, working out really quite nicely, because what I've got is it looks like an oak tree. Can't obviously see that far and that detail from here, however looking on the back of the camera when it's zoomed in, it looks like an oak tree. But there's the lovely autumnal leaves on it, but half of the tree from this angle it looks a bit dead, because you've got a lot more of the spindly branches there that really is interesting, with obviously the dark green of the rest of the trees and foliage behind as well. But this tree is right on the waterline here of the lake, and working out to be really interesting. So framing wise, what I've got is the obviously camera in vertical orientation, as you can see, and the bottom third of the image is all of the lake, and then the tree itself is over to the left hand side on the rule of thirds composition wise, and then obviously the tree with all of its shape, and keeping it just in there and framing it really quite nicely. I feel you've got, with obviously the zoom in lens, you can obviously see some of the details there. And what I made sure I wanted to do for this one, as I've got the time now, I'm not going to be able to capture some of the images that I really wanted, that sort of again sweep of the panoramic with obviously light hidden the top of the trees. Unfortunately that's not going to happen. So now I've got a bit more time to focus on this one. I wanted to actually make sure that I switched over to manual focus and made sure that I was as sharp as possible with obviously the detail on there, and zooming in on the back of the camera using the LCD screen, and obviously making sure that that's as sharp as possible will obviously work out really quite nicely. And from this angle there's probably 1 or 2 other compositions that you can really pick out, and it's worthwhile having obviously the zoom lens with you when obviously you're doing this type of photography. So as the light's not going to be produced that I wanted to capture on the top of these trees this morning, which is a shame, but it's not detracted from me actually exploring this location and really enjoying it. But I'm going to take a nice little walk now back through the woods, as it's a little bit lighter, rather than walking through there in the pitch darkness this morning, which was yeah, a little bit fun, shall we say, listening to the wildlife, and you're never too sure what's looking at you, and but yeah, obviously your imagination run wild, doesn't it? But yeah, I'll take a nice leisurely walk this time back through the woods. So I've made it back to the car now after a really leisurely, enjoyable walk back through the woods. But autumn, as I say, is a really interesting time of year photographically and also personally as well. I really do enjoy it. But it's timing it right. It can be frustrating to make sure that you're coming out when obviously the conditions are right, and I think hopefully today they're just turning, so maybe 1 or 2 more trips out to capture this lovely autumn colours. But thank you everyone for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you haven't considered it already, please consider subscribing, and until next time, take care.